Welcome back to Square Off. Our politics panel stepping in now with their thoughts about Governor Katie Hobbs' interview and much more. Joining us are Roy Herrera, a Democratic elections attorney at the law firm Herrera Arellano, and Daniel Scarpinato, president of the Wing Victory Agency and former chief of staff for Republican Governor Doug Ducey. Welcome back to Square Off to you both. Daniel, we invoke the name of your former boss, Doug Ducey. Katie Hobbs following in the grand tradition of tax cuts of Republican governors. What do you make of that?
Well, I know this may be a controversial view in some quarters, but tax cuts are really popular.
No.
And, well, some would question that, but especially when affordability is the #1 issue out there, the idea of letting people keep more of the money they earn, I think, is a political winner. What I find most interesting about this whole process is, you know, as you pointed out, this is the implementation of the One Big Beautiful Bill, which was very controversial when it passed. And you have folks, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, these are the words they use. There are folks in the legislature who describe themselves as socialists, democratic socialists. They voted for all of these tax cuts. And yes, there's tips and overtime and Social Security. There's also things that were called tax cuts for millionaires and billionaires. So it is an interesting turn of events, to say the least.
Is this just the result of divided government? Did she have no choice but to take it all?
Well, I mean, she had no choice to have a bipartisan deal. I mean, that's the nature of it. The legislature is controlled by Republicans, and so you're going to give a little and you're going to get a little. But I do think, you know, as we just heard from the governor, she was rightfully touting her successes in this session, which is, you know, over $1 billion of tax cuts, most of which are going to go to working people, middle-class people in Arizona. And to Scarp's point, I mean, I agree. I think nationally and in Arizona, the #1 concern is affordability. And trying to provide relief to people, I think, sets her up very well for November. And she did this, by the way, after avoiding cuts to, you know, people's health care through access, which was in the original Republican budget proposal, and also doing things like, you know, tax moratoriums on data centers, which is very popular with people.
But she did shrink government as well, cut 1,000 jobs. I don't know if those are positions or actual people.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and no doubt this is for everybody who's on the ballot who voted for this. I think you're going to see this as something that they tout. What is interesting, though, is like the cries of poverty, that the state doesn't have enough money, that everything's underfunded, and you know, this is a large amount of revenue that Democrats and all the unions and groups that typically are opposed to these things were either silent or voted yes. And I would say that's a good day for Arizona when Democrats and Republicans are fighting over credit for tax cuts. That's not happening in California or other states. So I think glass half full, it's a positive thing for our state.
He's writing the Katie Hobbs ad. Look at that.
I like it.
Let's turn to Senator Ruben Gallego. Full disclosure, you are an elections law attorney for the senator.
Correct.
News reports have raised questions about his use of PAC money, campaign dollars, for what appear to be quite personal purposes. Super Bowl tickets, a trip to the Tony Resort of St. Bart's. I don't think any of us have been there, have we? Babysitting. No. You are Ruben's election law attorney. Does any of this violate campaign spending laws?
It does not, and I think all public reporting has acknowledged that. There haven't been any allegations that anything was misreported or that anything that was reported or, you know, any of the expenditures we're talking about aren't allowed under any federal law or rule. So I think that's the case, and I think it's important, I think, as someone who has done this for a living for a long time and represented a lot of candidates, including Senator Gallego, that this is something that is pretty normal. These kinds of, you know, expenditures are things that you do see a lot. It's almost, you know, I would say it's a bipartisan tradition. It's something that Republicans also do. These PAC retreats occur in nice places typically, and it is what occurs.
I think Dan and I picked up on the words pretty normal. It might be pretty normal, but given in the wake of taking the same seat Senator Sinema held, whose spending was outlandish and questionable, certainly, is there a bit of tone deafness here? Have times changed?
Well, here's how I would see this: is Senator Gallego is known for a lot of things. Humility is not one of them. And I think that everyone on both sides of the aisle would agree with that. And he won by 2.5 points against Kari Lake in the last election. And sometimes in politics, you get lucky. And rather than kind of go do his job, he decided to run for president and go to the Iowa State Fair and present himself as God's gift to the Democratic Party. So yes, Gavin Newsom and Pete Buttigieg and other people who are more vetted are going to start to look at things and put things out there. So I think a lot of this is self-inflicted. I think Roy is right that there are other people on both sides of the aisle who probably have the same things in their finance reports, but they haven't put themselves in the spotlight like he has. And these last couple scenarios strike me as somewhat self-inflicted by basically launching a presidential campaign a month after taking office.
All right, got to end it there. Thank you so much for joining us, Dan Scarpinato, Roy Herrera. Have a happy 4th of July, one of my favorite holidays. That's our show for this week. Thanks very much to all of our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. See you back here next weekend for another round of Swear Off.